Hello, I'm Guy Thomas. In my last video, I made the rather heretical argument that insurance works better with some adverse selection. That's because some adverse selection is needed to maximise a quantity I call loss coverage, and I think loss coverage is a good metric for how well the insurance system is working for society as a whole. So some adverse selection is initially a good thing, but like most good things, it's not good without limit. In this video, I'm going to show you that if adverse selection goes too far, then the loss coverage will fall. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to use the same toy model again. So the top two scenarios there are the same as last time. First scenario, risk classification permitted, 50% loss coverage. Second scenario, risk classification restricted by the government, some adverse selection, and a higher 56% loss coverage. The reason I said insurance works better with some adverse selection is because if it goes too far, loss coverage can fall and insurance works less well. So let's look at a third scenario which shows this. So in scenario 3 at the bottom, we have classification banned again, so pooled premiums again. But in this case, the adverse selection has gone further, so none of the low risks now buy, and only one of the high risks buys. So the pool premium is now trivial. It's just the expected cost of one high risk insured. So that's 0.04, no need for a calculation for that. What about the loss coverage? Well, visually, the loss coverage is represented by the shaded area. And notice that it is smaller than the shaded area in either of the two earlier scenarios. Arithmetically, the calculation is insured expected losses divided by population expected losses, 25%. That number confirms the visual intuition. It is smaller than the 50% in scenario 1 and the 56% in scenario 2. So to summarise all three scenarios, loss coverage is increased with the right amount of adverse selection, but reduced by too much adverse selection. And so if you accept that loss coverage is a reasonable criterion for an insurance system, then you reach a rather surprising conclusion that insurance works better with some adverse selection, but not too much adverse selection. Now, both scenario 2 and scenario 3 restrict risk classification, but the outcomes were quite different depending on how much adverse selection we assumed. Which scenario is more likely in practice? Well, intuitively, that's going to depend on the comparative responses of the high and low risks to changes in price. That is, the comparative demand elasticities of high and low risks. There are a few papers looking at this, and the broad brush conclusion is that the argument I've made is not just an academic point. The elasticities needed to give an increase in loss coverage do seem realistic for some insurance markets. The argument, once again, doesn't depend on any particular choice of numbers that I've used. There's no trick in the numbers I've chosen. The point is quite general. I've explained all that in a toy example because it's easier that way. It's a bit like the principle of comparative advantage in international economics. It's much easier to explain in an example than in words. But let me now try to put it into words for you. First point, restrictions on risk classification lead to rise in average price, fall in numbers insured, and that's adverse selection. Second point, they also lead to a shift in coverage towards higher risks. And higher risks are, in a social sense, the right risks, the people who need insurance most. And third point, if that shift in coverage is large enough, it can more than outweigh the fall in numbers insured. So the quantity loss coverage, that is expected population losses compensated by insurance, can actually rise. Another way of thinking of this is that loss coverage measures the combined effect of the shifting coverage and the fall in numbers insured. From a social viewpoint, the shifting coverage is positive. The right risks are buying more insurance. On the other hand, the fall in numbers is negative. Fewer people are buying insurance overall. Most commentary on adverse selection focuses just on the fall in numbers insured. It misses the trade-off. It misses that the combined effect can go either way. I'll talk more about some applications of this loss coverage idea in later videos. But for now, I'd just like to note that this has obvious relevance to regulation of how insurers use big data. Using too much data to classify risk too finely, and therefore remove all adverse selection, will make insurance work less well. And note that the argument I'm making here is not predicated on any special consideration for the high risks. It's a matter of arithmetic, not of ethics. For more on this topic, please see my other videos or Google loss coverage for more papers and books. Thanks for watching.